Well, it's time to fix things in 5e again. What's next up on the fixing block, chopping? I don't know, whatever kind of block, is the Samurai Fighter. There's not too much that I want to change, but there are a few things that I think need adjusting. So if you want to see what that's going to be, stay tuned. Before I get started, guys, I did just want to say if you are new to the channel and you like what I'm doing, feel free to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I also stream on Twitch every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and every other Sunday. So if you want to see any of that, there's a link in the description. So that being said, what's wrong with the Samurai Fighter? I think it really boils down to one point, and that's kind of the same thing we saw when we did the Arcane Archer as well. Not being able to do what you want to do, your whole class feature, enough or often enough. So we're going to jump over here to D&D Beyond, and here we can see what the features are. So this did come out in Unearthed Arcana, and I did a whole video comparing the two, but we're probably going to recap most of that real quick. So this is what you get, and I think the Unearthed Arcana, I think largely the updates to it that we got in the final version are better, with the exception of maybe one or two. So you can see here at 3rd level, you're going to get a either history, insight, performance, or persuasion, or a language of your choice. That's a freebie thing you get at level 3, so that's nice. And then here's your main samurai feature here, fighting spirit. As a bonus action on your turn, you can give yourself advantage on weapon attack rolls until the end of the current turn. When you do so, you gain 5 temporary hit points. And when you hit 10, it goes up to 10 temporary hit points. When you hit 15, it goes up to 15. And here's the biggest part. When you use this feature 3 times, or you can use this feature 3 times, and you gain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. That's the big issue, right? You're a fighter. 90% of your stuff comes back on a short rest. Indomitable, Action Surge, Second Wind, all of the main fighter features come back on a short rest. For every fighter except for the Eldritch Knight, which spells don't come back on a short rest typically unless you're a warlock, and that's a whole funky thing anyway. So if you want every other fighter for every other thing that they do, it all comes back on a short rest, except for this thing, the main crux, main feature of the Samurai. And we'll talk about it, because at level 10, they do get one of those things like when you roll initiative and you don't have it, you get a use of it, which is fine. But even still, the Arcane Archer and the Battle Master both have that ability at level 10, but they still get the things back on a short rest. So let's look through the rest of the abilities. Then we'll come back and we'll get our final decision here. So at 7, you get Charisma. When you make a persuasion check, you get a bonus equal to your wisdom modifier, and you gain proficiency in wisdom saving throws. If you already have that, you get it in intelligence or charisma. At 10, you get that when you roll initiative and have no fighting spirits, your level 3 ability, you regain 1 use. Again, like I was saying before, Battlemaster Fighter gets the same thing, I think, at level 10. So does Arcane Archer. I believe, let's just check. Arcane Archer is at 15. Battlemaster Fighter is at 15. Okay, so that's the difference. The Battlemasters and the Arcane Archers get it at 15 as opposed to 10. So I don't know why you wouldn't just keep that same style, give it them at 15, and make it a short rest. I think that makes the most sense. I think that it would make them more, they'd feel better, they'd feel happier about it, because you get to use your ability more often. That's the whole thing that makes you unique as a samurai, over just choosing something like champion and having just your flat out, bonus to a critical hit or something like that. At 15, you get Rapid Strike, which is if you take the attack action on your turn and have advantage on attack roll against one of the targets, you can forgo advantage on that to make an additional attack as part of the same action. You can do so no more than once per turn. So that synergizes with your level 3 ability, where you can use your fighting spirit as a bonus action to get advantage on all attack rolls until the end of the current turn. Therefore, you could take the attack action to basically get an extra attack. So at level 15, you'd have 3 attacks. With Action Surge, you'd have 6. this could potentially let you get 7, but it limits it as no more than once per turn. So even though Action Surge is an extra action, that's still the same turn. And then lastly, Strength Before Death. If you take damage that reduces you to 0 hit points, it doesn't kill you outright. You can use your reaction to delay falling unconscious, immediately take an extra turn, interrupting the current turn. While you have 0 hit points during that turn, taking damage causes death saving throw failures as normal. 3 failed death saving throws can still kill you. When that turn ends, you fall unconscious if you still have 0 hit points. So potentially, you could second wind in here to gain yourself hit points back so you don't fall unconscious and die. The other big thing you can do while this is happening is if you go down to 0, it says you get a whole extra turn. If you still have an action surge left, you could action surge again, getting yourself more attacks, all boosted. It is a whole turn, so you could still use your bonus action to activate Fighting Spirit. So basically, you could do this once, Fighting Spirit with action surge. Then potentially at level 18, if you go down to 0, you could do it again and gain more attacks. Still make use of Rapid Strike and all of that. Now, Strength Before Death, I completely agree that could be once per long rest. That's a pretty big, powerful ability there. That's a long rest only ability. This, I think, is a short rest ability. So if we look back at the Unearthed Arcana about it, they basically gave you get pretty much everything that you already got in the finished version, except that it's just broken up a little bit more. So at 3rd level, all you got was Fighting Spirit. But here's the kicker. Back in the Unearthed Arcana, it gave you 2 things. Advantage on all attack rolls and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage, and this lasted until the end of your next turn. So this would potentially, I mean, this may have been overpowered, and I understand why they changed it. Because, again, let's just say you're a level 11 fighter, so you've got 3 attacks. That's this whole turn as a bonus action. These 3 attacks, plus potentially Action Surge, gets advantage. And then 3 attacks on the next turn also have advantage, only for 1 use. But here, you got it on short or long rest. So you got it there in the Unearthed Arcana. You got short or long rest, and they let you get 2 turns out of your Fighting Spirit. And I'd say resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. It's hard to say which one's better. Especially at level 3. Resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage versus 5 temporary hit points is huge. Like, that's way better. And it's synergized even better with the level 18 ability. So at 7, that's where you got your wisdom modifier to, but here it was to any charisma check, but they made it to persuade or please a noble or anyone else of high social status. They removed it and just made it persuasion checks. I would say just make it charisma checks. Let them have their wisdom modifier bonus to deception checks. Let them have their wisdom modifier bonus to intimidation checks. It was still called Elegant Courtier, even though it was not specifically tied to persuasion. And then this also gave you history, insight, or persuasion, or language. At 10, you got Unbreakable Will, which was you gain proficiency in wisdom saving throws, or, intelligence or charisma saves. At 15, you got Rapid Strike, which is different here. If you had advantage on an attack on your turn, you could forego advantage to immediately make an additional attack as a bonus action. That would only synergize with the pre-existing Fighting Spirit on the following turn. So it would be actually useless on the first turn, which is why I'm sure they changed it. They didn't give you the ability to get 1 use back when you roll initiative. And then at 18, you got Strength Before Death. If you take damage that would reduce you to 0 hit points, you delay the turn and immediately take a bonus turn. Same thing. However, you don't take the damage until that turn ends. I don't believe it said, no, this is when you go to 0 hit points, you can delay that damage. This is reduce you to hit point, don't cure your action. You can delay falling unconscious. This delayed the actual damage itself. And it even states here it's possible to do such things such as gaining resistance that changes the damage you take. So if it was bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage, you could have used Fighting Spirit to gain resistance and possibly not gone unconscious. And that obviously was once per long rest. So they both have abilities in the Unearthed Arcana version and the published version that synergize well with themselves. Some of the things I think are much better. So I think Rapid Strike, as it is in the published version, is better. I think the way they broke stuff up and gave you the proficiencies at level 3 along with fighting spirit is better. I think combining the check and the saving throw is fine. I do think that this should just be whenever you make a charisma check, not specifically persuasion. I don't think that really changes too much. I think that that's not like a huge game changer here. I think the initiative to gain 1 back makes sense. I would swap these. I'd give you a rapid strike at 15 or at 10. I guess that's a little powerful theoretically in that you could get a 3rd attack at level 10, but you're going to get 3 attacks at level 11 anyway. And then I'd change this to shorter long rest. I'd make the when you roll initiative, you gain a use at 15, like every other fighter archetype that gets something similar. And I really do like this one better, that you delay the damage until after your next turn. So that way, you could reduce the damage by gaining resistance or doing something else. This is probably more balanced in that you just delay the ability to fall unconscious, which makes sense. You could second wind to get your hit points back, or you could just try to go ham and use rapid strike, fighting spirit, and action surge. At that point, you're trying to just down the enemy again, potentially making, I think, upwards of, what would that be? A level 20. I think the thing is you can make 20 attacks in a turn or something crazy like that. Or at least 10 attacks in a turn. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I think here's my fix for the fighter. I'd say for the samurai fighter, I'd say you keep probably almost all of it. Change this to you regain uses when you finish a shorter long rest. Change this to just charisma checks, not just persuasion. Put tireless spirit at level 15, put rapid strike at level 10, and then everything is fine. That marries up to 2 other fighters, one that's been out since the player's handbook that has been tried and true, tested, and is fine. Arcane Archer is one they released in the same book, and they still changed it up. So I think that would make everything better. Yes, you don't get the ability to get 1 back when you haven't, roll initiative and don't have one till level 15, but you're getting it back on a short rest. And as I stated throughout the Arcane Archer video, if the whole thing that defines your class is gated behind, especially in this case, a long rest, when literally every other fighter thing and almost every other fighter class gets their stuff back on a short rest, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why change the design here? So that would be my fixes for the 5e sorcerer. I'll be honest with you up front, I have not played a sorcerer. I said sorcerer, I meant to say samurai. I have not played a samurai myself to actually test it out. I've attempted to on several occasions, but all of those campaigns or one-shots fell through, so I never got a chance to. Again, in a one-shot where you may not be doing this consistently, samurai might be really powerful. But the fact that you only get your whole thing 3 times per long rest. Now, yes, I would agree that there's how often is that going to come up, but you might use 2 or 3 fighting spirits in a singular combat, depending on how long the combat is, and then you're tapped for the day, which means the whole thing that makes you unique over everyone else, if you're not level 10 as it's published, means you can't get those back till you take an 8-hour rest. And that seems dumb. You're a fighter, everything else you get comes back. All of your cool abilities would be tied to that, except for your fighting spirit, your main crux ability. So like I said, a couple of tweaks, nothing too crazy, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that I'm way off base on this? Do you agree with me that you should make it short rest? Should that be the only change? Just make it short rest and leave everything else as it is? Have you played a samurai? Do you know what it's like? Have you seen and experienced this in real time? I'm curious. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.